Okay, so here's the news today. Russia is regrouping. Regrouping is a way of saying they're falling back, running scared, getting beaten back, but now they're using that as their pretext or their excuse for why they're doing what they're doing. Let's start with the Institute for the Study of War. Ukrainian forces, this was yesterday, not today. Ukrainian forces continue in Luhansk Oblast. And so you're seeing these both fronts, you're seeing big movement. Putin announced partial mobilization is having more significant short-term impacts on the Russian domestic context than the war in Ukraine. So again, there's multiple fronts for Putin as well. There's the front in Ukraine as well as the front domestically, which he has to pacify. Now let's look at the front in Ukraine. Again, there's two fronts in Ukraine. Putin appears to admit severe Russian losses in Ukraine. Russian troops have been retreating under pressure on both fronts, that is in the north at Kharkiv and in the south in Kherson. A report by BBC's Russian service said that an elite military Russian intelligence unit may have lost up to three-quarters of its reconnaissance manpower. So now we're not dealing with LPR or DPR irregular militia. We're dealing with an elite unit again. So here's what it looks like on the map. This is near Severodonetsk, Lysychansk, up in the north in Kharkiv. And here's the map. This is before Putin annexed 929. Now watch all of this change color. This a lot of real estate here. Watch 930, 910-1, 10-2, 10-3, 10-4, 10-5. I mean, that's a lot of ground that has changed hands. So that's what's happened here. Now, this is a BBC article about what was going on there. It's also translated from Russian, which is why you see that here. So it's English translated to Russian, translated back to English through Google. So it might be a little sketchy. Thrown in a meat grinder, the elite brigade of the GRU suffered serious losses during the retreat from Lyman. Well, that's interesting. The elite Russian military formations took part in the unsuccessful defense of Lyman, and they suffered serious losses. The 3rd Guards. Now we talk about guards, Special Forces Brigade. Guard means elite in Russian. So if you're given the title guard, it's like thinking ranger or special forces or SEALs or in the British commando or something along those lines. Such military formations have been sent to the most important military missions since Soviet times. The entire 3rd Special Brigade was killed by Special Forces. They withdrew into a meat grinder. That's talking about around Lyman. So these weren't militia. The exact number of special forces is classified, but even according to conservative estimates, the elimination of more than 200 fighters can be the equivalent of a complete failure of 2 special forces companies. And in this article, they actually did the math. So that's the really interesting thing here. They actually went and found out how many people were reported as casualties in like the local newspapers and things along those lines. So it was a significant thing. Now let's turn our attention to the south. Now here's the southern front. Here's Kherson in the south, and here they're making headway up here. So this is the day before annexation. So here's 930 annexation, 10-1, 10-2, 10-3, 10-4, 10-5. It is absolutely amazing how much ground the Ukrainians are taking in these last few days. And so that puts Putin in a bit of a bind here. There's attempts to play down retreats in Ukraine that are no longer working inside Russia. They're seeing the actual progress. It's leaking through. Moscow appointed Governor Kirill Stremanov. He's a fun guy. We were quoting Kirill yesterday. He's talking about 3,000 Ukrainians have been killed, and a day before talking about how we're not up in Kharkiv. We're a fence. They're not going to get through us. Far from a rout, the withdrawal was a tactical regrouping to deliver a retaliatory blow, says Stremanov on Wednesday. This is Stremanov, by the way. He does not look like he should be in charge of anything. I don't know the guy, but he just kind of doesn't look like he should be in charge. And he reminds me of Baghdad Bob. Do you remember Baghdad Bob during the Gulf War? He was the guy that was saying, no, there's no Americans here, while the Americans were breaking through, constantly reporting all the good news. We're striking back. We're destroying the enemy. And it was just terrible. He was lying the whole time. That's kind of what's going on with him. The retreat is catastrophic, says Roman Spakanov, a prominent war correspondent. That's very different than that we're getting ready to regroup and deliver a retaliatory blow. So that's what's actually going on, and it's leaking through. We get hundreds of requests every day from soldiers who want to find a way to cancel their contract, said one military lawyer who asked to speak anonymously for fear of infringing on Russia's laws that criminalize fake news about the military. So that's actually happening, and these laws are preventing them from fixing the system. So the system that they have, those laws were put in place to try to make it stronger, but it actually made it weaker because you can't tell the truth in this environment. Okay, let me keep moving. The Kharkiv Human Rights Protection Group talked about their approach to substantiating the crimes of genocide. And I'm only going to show you this because I want you to understand with everything that you've heard from me. And if you haven't heard other episodes, please subscribe. Look at back episodes because I've been doing this since day 85. But with everything that you've heard from me, here is Article 2 of the Geneva Convention on Genocide, right? And here's what it means to engage in genocidal actions. 1. Killing members of the group. 2. Causing serious bodily or mentally harm to members of the group. 3. Deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. 4. Imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, or forcibly transferring children of the group to another group, which is what Russia did to take children and move them to Russia. According to Article 2 of the Convention, the following acts shall be punishable: genocide, conspiracy to commit genocide, direct and public incitement to commit genocide, attempting to commit genocide, or complicity in genocide. So by any measure, I mean, if you're paying at all any attention, the Russians are committing genocide based on the Geneva Convention. Okay, now it's time for fun with Russian state media. Russia officially becomes 113,000 square kilometers larger, according to Pravda. New territories have joined Russia in accordance with the Constitution in Article 4 of the federal constitutional law. So Putin has, dotted the I's and crossed the T's. Here's the analogy that I think works best here. I see, now I'm married, I'm not going to do this, but let's hypothetically say I see a pretty girl, I go grab her, I bring her back to a place where I have her under duress at the point of a gun, sign marriage papers, say our vows, and then we're married. I bring her back to my apartment. Now, while I am changing, she runs out the window and runs away. That's kind of what happened here. Legally, on paper, we're married, but in reality, it's not going to work out so well for us. I think that's a good analogy. Putin signs a unification treaty for new regions. Earlier, the documents, now here's the legal process, that marriage process I was talking about. Earlier, the documents were unanimously endorsed by the Federation Council, the upper house of the Russian parliament, that's like their Senate, or House of Lords if you're British. The agreements were ratified Monday on by the State Duma, that's like the lower house in the US Congress, or the House of Commons in the British system. And after they were certified by the country's constitutional court. So they're going through all these elaborate legal steps. But look, if I broke into your house and stole your stuff, and then I, had it legally proven that I'm the owner, it doesn't matter. I'm still a thief that stole. It doesn't. All the legal stuff that you do from here doesn't matter if the initial act is illegal. So here's a Pravda article. An hour after a tactical nuclear strike, Russia will move to take Kyiv. Okay. Russia may use tactical nuclear weapons against the armed forces of Ukraine in the event that the offensive of Ukraine troops toward the new Russian regions continues. So they're saber rattling, and it's a bad idea. I mean, I think Putin has been put clearly on notice that you do this, very bad things will happen, like sinking your entire Black Sea fleet or something along those lines. It'll be a big retaliatory strike. Non-nuclear retaliatory strike, but big retaliatory strike. The final decision on the use of tactical nuclear weapons has not been made. Now, this line was fascinating, and I'm not sure that I understand it. If you understand it, please help me understand. Maybe somebody understands the translation. At the same time, the phrase, "pray for Russia to win, otherwise you won't pray at all," has become a catchphrase in the Kremlin. Doctor of Economics Professor Nikita Krishnishny says. Okay, pray for Russia to win, otherwise you won't pray at all. So if Russia doesn't win, you're going to die. I'm not sure I understand exactly what the idea here is, but if you know, please let me know. Okay, next one. OPEC Plus confirms oil production cut. Okay, this is really bad for the world economy, for gas prices, for all that. Reduction of the cartel, and it is a cartel, like the mob, it's a cartel. Okay, the cartel announced on Wednesday, according to OPEC, the steps come, quote, in light of the uncertainty that surrounds the global economic and oil market outlooks and the need to enhance the long-term guidance for the oil market. So they're cutting for the long-term health of oil. No, they're cutting because they're going to make crazy profits off of this. And I mean, it's partly self-inflicted. Like, at least in America, one of the first things that President Biden did was remove the oil producers' ability to produce oil domestically in the United States. And had he not done that, oil prices would be significantly lower on the world market, and we'd have a tool that would allow us to fight back on that. But we just don't do that. Um, it's uh, an unforced error. Okay, Russian troops ready for counterattack in Kherson. And again, we are back to my friend, this guy who is the head, the Moscow appointed head over Kherson. And he is saying this: the Russian army is conducting maneuvers. The regrouping of the front in the current conditions gives an opportunity to gather strength and strike already, Stremisov said. The day before, Stremisov said that the armed forces of Ukraine was no longer advancing in the Kherson direction. Well, apparently he lied, because you saw with your own eyes that they are advancing and they're taking that ground. Okay, that was fun with Russian state media. Thank you for your time today. I'll be back tomorrow, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.